you know the story of Absalom Jones. He was born a house slave in 1746 in Delaware. He taught himself to read out of the New Testament and some other books. At age 16, he was sold to a store owner in Philadelphia who was enlightened enough to encourage him to go to night school at a school that was run by the Quakers for slaves. At age 20, he married another slave, and at that point he had earned enough money that he could have purchased his own freedom, but instead he purchased hers. John Liebler commented on the clergy list last night that if you want a great Valentine's Day story, think of Absalom Jones purchasing his wife's freedom rather than his own. It was another 22 years before he purchased his own freedom. One source says that at least part of the reason for that was that their children would then be born into freedom. In 1787, some black Christians organized the Free African Society, which was the first such organization in the country, and Absalom Jones and Richard Allen were elected the overseers. In 1792, they began to build a church, which was consecrated 2 years later, and they applied for membership in the Episcopal Diocese of Pennsylvania with two conditions. They requested that they be in charge of their own affairs and that Absalom Jones be licensed as a lay reader, and if it was deemed that he was qualified, that he would be ordained. William White was our first presiding bishop in 1789, and then elected again in 1795 until his death in 1836, which is the longest term that any presiding bishop has served. He ordained Jones a deacon in 1795 and priest in 1802. And under his leadership, St. Thomas African Episcopal Church grew to over 500 members in its very first year. So, as nearly as I can tell, he was a sort of early Episcopal version of Martin Luther King when the issue was slavery rather than segregation. He was a powerful orator, a committed abolitionist, a faithful pastor, mild-mannered man known as an example of persistent faith in God and in the church as God's instrument. Saints Galore says he personified the indomitable spirit of his people who were one day to sing, "We shall overcome." I want to draw your attention to just one point in the gospel reading. It's very interesting. Jesus says, "I have called you friends because I have made known to you everything that I heard from my Father." It would almost seem to me to be the other way around. Because you are my friends, I told you everything that I've heard from the Father. But that's not what he says. I have called you friends because I have made known to you everything that I heard from my Father, which is directly parallel to what he says of himself. The Son can do nothing on his own accord, but only what he sees the Father doing. The Father has told me everything that he's doing. That's the key to my ministry. The key to your ministry is that you pay attention to what I'm telling you. And obviously the folks who put together the lections for today believe that that was what Absalom Jones was doing. He was listening to the Lord Jesus, telling him, this is my agenda. Carry this out. That has to be our agenda, carrying out what Jesus is